because now I have the honor to welcome one of the, if not the very, very first Gaia-X project or ecosystem initiative on the stage, EuProGigant. Actually, I happened to be working a little bit with the guys. Please, who is the first one to present? Stefan, thanks a lot. And they will give a very holistic view how data spaces, actually how service ecosystem, digital ecosystem might work. So they have, I think, they intend to present 5 or 6, I don't look up the gender, 5 or 6 different vignettes of what constitutes ecosystem work. And it's not this, there is, I have to, before I come to that, sorry, I've got overruled, of course, by the organizers, or by us ourselves. You still remember the Gaia-Mon conquest, and one of the winners of yesterday, or one of the quickest to collect everyone was, of course, Stefan. So please have a second try. I think you can have a second try this day. Everything is reset, and you get a nice bag. I remember, Stefan, you get a nice bag for collecting the Pokemons. Unfortunately, it's only symbolic, so you cannot take home the whole leadership team of Gaia-X. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, this is if you want to connect. You are the controller. Yeah, I did. Yeah, you know, as a manager, you have nothing under control. Yeah. But I like that, yeah. So if everyone made a photo, yeah, that's nice, yeah. Okay, please, yeah, thanks a lot, Stefan. The floor is yours. Yeah, and I will give you the mic. Yeah, please. And I will remove the bloody...
Yeah, it's, I think, more in your way than in ours. Yeah, thank you and welcome. We have like 5 talks. Now I wanted to show the slide how many talks we have. Technically, we cover 3 technical kind of deep dives and 2 use cases which showcase how the tech can be used. My first part will be Gaia-X compliance, how we have our journey. As Christoph mentioned, we have quite, I think now 3 years about experience with Gaia-X and compliance, and I think it's a good start to show how technically Gaia-X itself moved in the part of compliance, which we followed up by Paul, a colleague of mine at Posedio, which we covered the policies on compliance validation, what we did there, how ODRL and Rego can work together. Of course, we have then our combined paper creating a gateway for the manufacturing industry. As we learned of I think all sessions, it's kind of hard to connect to every data space, and especially the manufacturing industry has the need to connect to several, for example, Catena, but also like special manufacturing data spaces. And then we go into the use case section, which will present our CO2 equivalent footprint production, especially in the plastic industry. And last but not least, Roman will present how we, especially in emits, interacted with product pass administration shell in the environment of the systems living lab. So before we start, why is Gaia-X important in EuProGigant? So we have the quite interesting term, EuProGigant is a project for calamity avoiding self-orchestration, which can mean a lot. And we have the goal of smart and sovereign use of data in manufacturing. So how can Gaia-X help us there? For the calamity avoiding, you can see this resilience concept. So how can Gaia-X help us with resilience? It's about transparency and to find how the critical paths, especially in our software industry, is and find, basically every critical path can be. Nowadays, Gaia-X is more like cloud service oriented, but it's also very important for every supply chain. The second term is the self-orchestration, which we interpreted, we want to have something context aware. We want to know if we use it, for example, want to have an EU-based cloud service provider, that's a context we have to deliver and that has to be verified. And there the service offerings scheme of Gaia-X can be very helpful because it contains a lot of information that actually delivers us a lot of context. And for the smart and sovereign use, as Christoph mentioned the term, now we find it again. there is it interesting to have the trust, the identity, the policy, the conformity assessment profile, and the conformity assessment and many more. So for the history of Gaia-X, our first Gaia-X credential was back in mid-22 for the Gaia-X for the Hanover Fair, where we presented our first Gaia-X compliance together with Delta DAO. Kai was also on site. Thanks, Kai, for that. And after that, we got into how to automate it. How can we streamline it, make it more usable? So the first thing was, of course, you start with scripts. Then we went for the next Hanover Fair for a template-based approach. So we fill in the critical new fields that have to be generated by every asset. And yeah, since I wanted to, I started with Go as a language, and I wanted really an own library which I can control, where I have the like a really strict type language. I developed a Go library for Tagos, so we can have an approach that allows us to interact with the Gaia-X compliance service and generate dates, generate verify credentials, but also verify, because at that point, the biggest part was missing is the verification process. Some people just sent the verify credential back to the clearinghouse, which was not ever meant to be that case. So for the next part, or again, the next Hanover Fair, the service actually requested his own Gaia-X compliance. So why use any third service if the service itself can do it? And of course, this year we updated, or I updated for Loire, which will be part of the next. Oh, I see there was a Pokemon build in my slides. So get grab it fast. No, I can really recommend. Please participate. It was a nice giveaway, so please scan fast. But for the first compliance structure, I highlighted the part that was actually not that easy for me, because it was not standard conformant. We have had started, and I think that was correctly identified from the lab team and Pierre, that verify credential will be the future and that it's really good to implement them. Badly enough, there was not really much practical implementations out there and not a lot of good examples, so naturally there was also a problem with that. But that was the past, because in the next, in the Tagos release, the team improved it, and we now have an embedded proof, and we have what you see in the top, actually an ontology, what was missing before, which kind of screwed a lot of libraries working with JSON linked data and RDF in general. But now we have a proper proof, which kind of relies sadly on the existence of every field up there and the formation. So you have to put it one-to-one in, how is it called? There's an spec that orders the fields in the map of the JSON alphabetically. But then before I get too technical, anyway, it kind of was bad that the proof itself was only viable if you kind of read everything and then provide the proof, which was then fixed in Loire, because embedded proof is not so fine, but envelope proof, that's the future. So we have changed from the JSON LD format with the embedded proof to an application VP shot was gladly enough introduced, I think, the year before or something, and now we have JOT token, which we can use, which we cannot humanly read, but it's very nice that we have the proof now enveloped in the JOT credential, which is, I highlighted it now, green, everything is very nice, and I think that's, from a technical perspective, to use verify credential, verify presentation, very nice that the clearinghouses are now on the compliance service all on the same page, and now we can actually start building more use cases. So before we start into how use cases work, we have, like for the first 3 talks, an recurrent, simple example, because we didn't want to have a manufacturing example at the start, because then it will not be a technical focus. People have to focus on to understand that use case first and then to understand the technical side. So we made a super simple example, which is based on a real life experience I had in the past, which I worked for the said data report company, where it is about gathering customer data from a business company and collect the service and make reports out of it. So what is the target of the data report company? Or basically I start with the business company, of course, has some customer independent of which domain it is. In my past it was finance. They have customers, of course, and they collect the service, and they are looking for the company that gets the data, generates the data report, and they, of course, have in the first step to collect the service, in the second step to generate the report itself, and then looking for a way to store the data. And that's the thing where Gaia-X gets interesting, because now we have to look for a proper provider for the data storage, which could be, of course, any cloud service provider, but could also be any intermediary that uses an infrastructure which itself can be a cloud service provider. So what is the actual requirements? So of course the consumer has GDPR requirements, and we have to comply with the requirements, and we assume that the business company has the concrete requirement that the data storage is within the EU, which I think is quite common. If you have GDPR compliance, it's kind of easy to have a company that itself is dedicated to comply to GDPR. But what now has the data report company to do is to formulate that abstract requirements into actual policies. A policy for data storage within the EU, an access policy how the business company can retrieve the report on the storage itself, and not that it retrieved by email, sent forward in all ways, because at the end, data space is all about that we can make data accessible. And last but not least, the data storage provider selects the infrastructure provider based on the decision the policy is needed. So now the interesting part, how does it look for the compliance? So to be enabled that the business company retrieves the data, they have to provide an identity credential, which was kind of missing, but I heard it's now on the way that we have a Gaia-X participant credential. So yeah, the people are laughing there exactly know what I'm talking about, which is very nice that we got that, because now the business company can provide some actual identity means in the space of Gaia-X. For the data report company, it's they will have to search in a, for example, catalog or however, a proper storage offering. And in the negotiation phase, they have to submit the policies, which again will be depicted by Paul in way more detail. After that, we have the Gaia-X storage service offering negotiation phase, where everyone can have his idea. I think there is the data, how is it called, Christoph? The data exchange working group. Yeah, data exchange service working group. Exactly, yeah, he's nodding. Where you can find the proper shapes, and then, of course, after the storage, the data report company has the need that they can verify at each given point that the data storage provider is still complying to the rules. And providing the maybe or maybe not, depending on the use case, the infrastructure provider can provide for the data storage company the offering of the infrastructure itself. So now we thought one key requirement here is how to giving the view of the data storage provider, what he has to do on a technical side, because it's a tech talk. How can he do that? The first important part is how does he get the first compliance about his service? We are not talking about the asset yet, but about the service. So of course, he's the owner of the service. He starts with a configuration of the storage service, which then maybe or maybe not, we used OpenID Connect for it, based on Keycloak in this case. The client logs, the storage client itself authenticates there and starts generating, based on a template, the storage offering request. And of course, before you can have a storage offering through the compliance service, you need a legal number, legal registration number, verify credential from the compliance service over the notary. I won't go technically into deep. It's anyway optional track. I hope everyone is familiar with that one. Or maybe I just turn it around. Is anyone not familiar with the overall process, how getting compliance? Good. Or maybe not so good if I ask. No one is. Yeah, and of course then this whole thing is put together in a verified presentation, which is not signed yet and goes through a signer service, because as we heard already yesterday, the key infrastructure is very important and cannot be rolled out or realistically rolled out to every service, but it would be nice so that there's a company-wide or whatever signer. And we use that to retrieve from or use a secret engine or a transit engine involved to sign or get the key to actually sign the verified credentials, or in the case of the legal registration number, in the legal person shape, or sign the whole verified presentation to get it to the compliance. So, and what's after all these steps, what's the only user interaction they have to do? Just query an API, get the full service description, and it's done. And this looks the way. For example, in this case, you can have just a simple query request to an endpoint in the storage service, and you get a verified presentation, which then includes, of course, the storage service, because we are on a service level, the label criteria, which is nothing else than the label credential as the compliance credential, and the legal person, the legal registration number, and everything what is needed to represent the service. And the next part is now the more interesting, how can we build up on that compliance credential, which covers the offering, the data storage offers, into a data product offering. And here we have two ways which only differentiate in the first three steps. Once it can be external user that's requesting a story, the information about Gaia-X compliance, or it can be an internal user. For the internal user, it's pretty clear. It's the same way as before. You use the OpenID Connect provider. You are using, in this case, Keycloak, get a token, everything as the tech guys anyway use. The more interesting part is the external user, because the external user can now use the participant credential, which includes all information about his company, and we assume the other company has probably given the credential to him, which we don't care, because we have a contract on a business-to-business side, and we don't care how he got the credential, because that's in the scope of the other company. And there we go in and start resolving that verified presentation participant, and go through the asset policies, again, which we'll cover in the next talk, and give access to the compliance generation. And if that's requested, the same steps as before will apply, only with the difference that we're now requesting a data product. So for the user, again, pretty simple. You just request the file you want with an optional version number, and what you in the end get is a data product, in this case a virtual product, because the data resource shape has some issue, which has an open ticket, I think, and of course the label credential, legal person, etc. So in the end, is Gaia-X Loire compliance easy? Yeah, from the user side, I think we showcased that two simple query requests can give you compliance. From the developer side, it actually took me about 1,500 lines of code to have both options implemented, and this has only templates for about 20 values out of it. So there is room till the end. But I think that's a good part now that we are in Gaia-X on the way, that we are not having the issues from understanding on the user side, because the user side can now use it. Now we have it only as a technical problem, but that we can solve. So I would like to hand over to Paul, which now... Oh, there's a question. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Only to inform, because maybe some people doesn't know, the Marketix workshop starts now at 10 in the second floor, in the Ocean room. So I let you hear, and a little bit jealous that you are here also with the technical part. Thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to say, please stay here, it's more interesting. Shouldn't have given me a microphone. So now I hand over to Paul, which you introduce you to the policies.
Thanks, Stefan. I have one business slide, one. Also, you can stay for. And then I will have to take off my jacket, right? That's the rule now. Okay. So the question I was asking, if we have this auto compliance that Stefan just presented, what can we do with it? How can we use it? And this is the same example, just a bit differently. Maybe I can go there. Differently described. You have the business company, the data report company, the data storage provider, and they all have compliant Gaia-X descriptions. Right? The data report company has a service offering here. It says it depends on the storage service offering from the data storage provider. That itself is an aggregation of resources. One of them is hosted on. It's a physical resource that's down there in the infrastructure provider. So, and how to make business sense of this. So, for example, we can do usage policies, something like the employees of a company are only allowed to use services that store company's customer data within Austria or Germany. Austria and Germany is because our project is Austria and Germany, but this is a decision by the CEO office to limit legal risks. And the question is how we can use the Gaia-X service credentials to do that. Maybe from the data report company's perspective, this could be slightly different. It's that the policy is then that the services they deploy are only allowed to use the storage within Austria things. And this is the source for this policy can be a contract with the business company. Right? So from the perspective of the business company has a requirement, it trickles down to the storage company, and they want to actually keep the contract with the business company. Right? And for that, we use policy. To automate that, we can use policy as code. And Gaia-X is one of the standards. One of the standards in Gaia-X is open digital rights language. And here is an example for that. Here we have the agreement. It uses the OVC profile, which is specified by Gaia-X. And we want to give permissions to the employees of the company, right? And this is the assignee in this case. The signer, the one who puts up the rules, is the CEO, and the target is, in this case, all the services, right? It's the abstract services for everything, and the permission is action use, right? But we want to constrain that. And that's why there is a constraint. And the constraint looks like this. I'll go into the first part a bit more. One thing is down there, it's the storage service offering. This is what we're selecting. This is what we're interested in. We want to filter out all storage service offerings, and then we want to look at them and see if they are in Austria or in Germany. And for that, we go into the credential, and this is part of the OVC profile. We take a look at the credential subject, then we go into the aggregation of resources. We filter it for all physical resources. That's there. Then we go into that credential subject, we go to the location, and then we check the country code of the location. And that needs to be one of the lists you've seen before. This needs to be one of this one, right? So this is the technical implementation of checking a Gaia-X description for our business case. And who can use that? So the first example is an employee. An employee doesn't want to go to management, or the manager doesn't want to answer all the questions of what he can do or cannot do. So we can automate the question can I use service X? The only thing the employee has to provide is the Gaia-X credential, and then he knows, right? It's guardrails for the employee set up by the CEO. The other thing, in the other interesting use case is the data report company, and what they can do for the technicians is to use this policy evaluation in the deployment of their services. So when they configure a change, and probably in the Git as a Git setup or in the Git pipelines, then we can check in the pipelines the Gaia-X service description it produces and check if it's compliant to the policy, which is the part of the legal contract with the business company. So we can give the technicians basically the guardrails to not break contracts of the company. Yeah. So this was for the part of usage policies from services. The other aspect Stefan mentioned is access to the data, right? And what we want to do, so the data report company stores the data in the data storage. This is the step here. And then we want to give direct access to the business company to the reports. Right? Maybe a side note, from the ASER-X project, they did something that they took ODL policies and translated them to AWS S3 policies, which is kind of nice and I think worth mentioning. So how would the policy look like for this? This is a bit simpler. So what you have here, you have again a policy, it's type agreement. Then you have a target, which is here then the data itself, or the report. You have the assigner, which is the data report company, and then you have the permission. And the permission is for reading this, and then you have a much simpler constraint where you just say, everyone who wants to access this policy needs to show a credential of the type VET ID, as a Gaia-X VET ID, and the VET number needs to be this one, right? And then he can give access to it. And then maybe a word about policy as code. So what we do, we put policy into code, how we structure it from a software architecture perspective. So what we talked about now is the policy enforcement point. This is the thing that makes the decision. For example, if a user requests data, the policy enforcement point, then it goes to a policy decision point, which evaluates the policy. It takes, in order to do that, he needs the policy. This is where he gets it from the policy administration point, which is also the point where we can manage it and configure it. In the policy, there is data. And if we refer to data or some state of the world in the policy, he can get it from the policy information point, right? And this then altogether calculates a decision, and the policy enforcement then executes the decision by either allowing a request to the data or denying it. So this is the overall structure. And what we did, we used the Open Policy Agent as our policy decision point. We extended it a bit with Gaia-X functionality. This is, well, so we can resolve VC shot and check the Gaia-X compliance. And we added functionality to evaluate ODRL policies with the Gaia-X OVC profile. So, and we implemented our own ODRL engine for it, since there is a lot of different variants out there, but none of them fitted our use case. So what we gained from using Open Policy Agent is it's battle tested. It's a CNCF project. People use it. We use it in other projects to protect our Kubernetes infrastructure. It has a large community. So if you need help, then it all has a lot of nice things when you actually want to develop your policies furthermore. So for example, they have a decision log. So you can look at all the decisions the policy system made and maybe and replay it if you want with new rules. So it's there for you to maintain and develop your policy rules as you see fit, right? It's not a thing you write once, it's something you maintain over time. And then it has also a bit of a different language. So what we see was ODRL. Open Policy Agent uses Rego as a language to write policies, which, depending on taste, is, in my opinion, like more maintainable. It is modularity, it's easier to test things, and a lot of other nice benefits. So and from this, we get the benefit kind of both worlds. And how does it look? An example, we have here a bigger policy for Open Policy Agent, and what it does is, it generally does not allow a request, right? This is not. And then it checks some validation rules, and only if all of the validation rules do not provide an error, we allow access. And for these rules, the first thing is we resolve the VP from the JOT, so we get the Gaia-X VCs. Then the first rule, this is the only allow valid issuers, is we check all the issues in the VC, and if there is one in there we don't trust, we just deny the request. So this is, yeah. As of in this example, there is the data valid issuer, which means that we have stored what are valid issues somewhere in our policy architecture, but this also could be as easy as an input, which is, well. And then the interesting thing where we put ODL and OPA together is the rule down there. So we only allow requests if, we deny the request if the ODL policy, which is provided by the service, evaluates we deny the request if it does not evaluate to true, right? So, and with this we're quite flexible what we do, right? We can write OPA policies, we can write ODL policy, mix them together. We can do it dynamically. A user can provide us an ODL policy, and we evaluate it in these decision points. Yeah. And as the last slide, so the bigger picture in a data ecosystem. So the first point what we discussed is compliance and validation together with Gaia-X descriptions. This is what I covered now. I think this is important for all for the whole data ecosystem. But you can also think of using such a system if you look at the direction of the federator for authorization there, the federation services, not just as using them, but also as an information provider for your policies. You can think of these policies within participant internal systems. This is what we usually do. We have policy systems within our customer to protect their infrastructure, protect the data. So this is something that should fit in. And then, of course, at the border between participants. Between participants, or if you think of some participant communicating towards federated service or multiple federated service, policy can be applied there. And this is something my next speaker, Fabian, will cover slightly in his presentation about connecting different data spaces. So, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So as introduced, I would like to go a bit more into the actual interaction with ecosystems and other participants and how we could implement this policy as code example in these ecosystems. And maybe to zoom a bit out more, why do we have always ecosystems and not just one ecosystem? So of course we have an example of a manufacturing company or a business company which has a lot of relations with other companies, customers, suppliers, so multiple suppliers, customers, and also what's maybe interesting is the relation with end users where we can get information about how our product is used in the end, and also for projects like circular economy and so on, we also want to know how the product is reworked and used in that sense through services or workshops. So we have a lot of interactions with different companies, different domains, and so we try to really communicate in a lot of different domains where it's probable that we have a lot of different ecosystems where we have to communicate, and so also a lot of different technology stacks which are used there. So that's one problem for the manufacturing companies, to how we really interact with all these different ecosystems. So that's also a slide here which shows all the different ecosystems, and the idea is, of course, to have one optimally multiple standards which are uniquely used in all these ecosystems. So we have some common layer, a trust plane, for example, here with the Gaia-X trust framework, which we can use to ease the interoperability between all these different ecosystems. And as also presented yesterday, we can then use the extended governance mechanisms or domain extensions to have domain-specific ecosystems. And here, for example, showed PondusX ecosystem, which is developed by Delta DAO or based on the XFSC components or EDC, IDSA specifications, all these different ecosystems. And so we had the issue in the project, how do we really make use of all these different ecosystems and the data which relies in these ecosystems, and to really connect all these participants. So what we really wanted to look into was the communication between ecosystems, between participants also inside these ecosystems. And a lot of these ecosystems also make use of connectors, and how can we really bridge them all together. So the idea we came up with in our project is the so-called ecosystems gateway. So it's just a software component which resides at the edge of the participant, so directly in front of the communication to the ecosystem. And it really is the way of abstracting all the interaction with different ecosystems, so the PondusX ecosystem, IDSA-based ecosystem, and so on, and abstract it to one component. So the user, the participant, only has to interact with this one ecosystem gateway and have much easier way to communicate in multiple ecosystems and just focus on its own value creation and, in the best way, don't have to work with all different ecosystem implementations. And now, how do we implement also the policies which Paul and Stefan presented here? How do we get the policy enforcement and the sovereignty also in this context into the equation? And as Paul mentioned, we also want to have the policies at the border of the participants, so we have an edge in this sense where we can check all the policy and evaluate if the access and use of data or services is allowed in this case, and have it close to our own data and services, so don't have long transfer ways and so on. So it's came kind of self-explanatory to use the gateway in this way as a policy enforcement point. So to directly inject the policy enforcement and the checking of the policies into the gateway, so we can intervene before publication of any service or consumption of any services, and this we can directly inject into our gateway. So to come back to the display which Paul already showed is how it's looking architecturally. So as Paul also described, we needed the policy enforcement point and the policy decision point where the decisions is made about the policy evaluation. And we inject here our ecosystem gateway as the enforcement point, which simply requests the policy decision point, here the open policy agent, and gets the answer if this action is allowed or denied, and acts accordingly, and here just blocks the connection to the ecosystem, to the connector or the participant agent, which communicates into the ecosystem itself. And how does it look in code terms? So to also get a bit more technical, we have here an exemplary code example, how it can look into our gateway. And here, for example, we call a function which is the create offering. So we want to create an offering in an ecosystem. For example, here in the PondusX ecosystem, and what we're doing here is to resolve the Gaia-X information, so the verified presentation for the service offering here in the first block. So we just get this information from this case, just a link to the offering, resolve it, and send it to our policy decision point, our open policy agent, which then can evaluate the policies which are in this offering. And yeah, if then we can get the answer from the policy decision point if it's allowed or not. And regarding the answer, we either stop the execution and don't publish this offering, or we continue further and publish this offering to the specified ecosystem. And now a bit more deeper into how this looks in the policy decision points. So the open policy agent, what examples, for example, could we use here? One example which is shown here is just to look into the offering if any competitors are allowed in this offering. So for example, in the manufacturing industry, a lot of times we have sensible information in our data and don't want any competitors to have access to this data. So we can, as a company, have in our business logic the requirement that any offering which is published has this denial of any competitors for the access of the data. So if we want to publish now an offering, as I said, it goes through our gateway and checks, is there any prohibition of competitors, and if not, it's denied. And this is exactly what is done here in the Rego code, which is shown here. So I have no blocks here, so I needed to show it here in per hand. What we're doing here is just to look also in the VCs, in the service offering, which is resolved here, and we look into the service policy in the service offering, and can, for example, look for an ID. So if the ID deny competitors is present, it's fine. Or we can, of course, directly look into the contents. So if it's a prohibition policy present, then it's fine, and we can allow it, and vice versa. And of course, we can imagine a lot of different use cases, a lot of different business logic which can be implemented this way. And so through this ecosystem, we can get a good control over our data and enforce a lot of policies and have control how and who can access our data. So in what use cases specifically can we use this? Just generally, it's of course of big interest if we have multiple stakeholders, a lot of companies which have to interact to make a value proposition. And this is, for example, the case in the use case of the digital product passport or the CO2 prognosis over a product life cycle or supply chain. So it's very important that we have a system here which is also automated to have it as easy as possible to orchestrate that. And to come back maybe to Stefan's slide in the beginning, this is the use case where we, of course, want to have this smart and sovereign self-orchestration through the architecture, which are shown here. And now I want to give to my colleague, Gerald, who can show you a concrete example which we developed in the project.
Hello, you're welcome. So what I want to talk about is one of the use cases we used. We started with 4 use cases. One of those was a product carbon footprint of creating some cup. For that, in the middle of the project, we realized that's a very interesting thing because the regulatory requirements become more and more strict. So there was more demand to really look into this use case and automate it. So what we had in mind was we look at the injection molding machine, where we had many partners involved in the project, and it's normally the case that in the use phase of the injection, that is where most of the CO2 is consumed. And the benefits results in the use of the material information is in the production development phase, but also to optimize the process parameter. And we look at the whole value chain. So in our, we build a web application. You can put in the information before and after the process here, so you can have the whole value chain if you want to. How did it look when we started? This is the machines or the companies involved. However, the middle part is where this data is collected, and the data was collected manually. So we started with an Excel sheet, and all the information from the partner would come in by email or telephone or whatever, or paper. So that was really very cumbersome and took a long time to really come to a decision here. And so we wanted to improve this, and we asked the partners to provide different interfaces. So now the middle part is no longer an Excel worksheet, but we use a web application that we developed at our company. And we have different interfaces. For example, for the simulation, we collected all the data information, and then we send it to the simulation factory, and they send it back. And they also then send it to Arburg to get the information. So we have different REST APIs and interfaces to all the partners. We also have a product database where you can look up what the CO2 product carbon footprint of your material is. So all this information is automated. And at the end, you get a nice graph and comparison, and you can compare different scenarios, and then you can decide which one you want to really use in production. So the advantages are we have far fewer manual steps in this whole process. We have a direct data exchange between partners in the supply chain, for example, Simcon and Arbot. And we can retrieve data directly from REST APIs, and we also got the partners to implement new REST APIs. So, for example, Simcon, they had the machine, they had their simulation software in a Windows machine, and they opened it up with REST APIs so we could actually access it, and we don't have to manually transfer the data, do the simulation, and get the data back. So let me give you an example. Let's hope that this starts automatically. That's how I made it. Yeah, okay, here we go. So that is the web application. When you're new, you sign in, you provide some information here, and at the end, when you have provided the information, a participant is created, and we create a Gaia-X compliant participant credential, identifying you as a participant in this Gaia-X compatible ecosystem here. Okay, so I just had to create some new account to demonstrate this. Yeah, I'll put a picture of mine here, okay. Just okay, and then we can search for the like code here, for the company name. So it will directly connect to the right interface to retrieve the correct like code, and then you can log in. Now you have different ways. You have a service marketplace, and you have services, and at the end, once you have the service, you have the orders you provide with this. So we select, okay, we want this service marketplace, and now we generate this new service. So now we have to define the product we want to create. So this is, in our case, a plastic cup. We have two types of materials, PP or PC. Then from the Echo event database, we can retrieve the information for this material. And then we have to provide some parameters, how many cups we want to produce and how many machines we really have. So then we have a cut file where it is described how this whole thing should look like. So we say from which company it comes, and then we provide the details of the cut file. And then this directly selects the right machine that I can use. So it looks at the parameter I provided and then selects exactly one of the, gives me a choice of machines I could use, and I could use one. I selected one, so now I say, okay, how long I want to produce. And then it gives you, okay, a summary, so I can decide, okay, is everything fine or not, or I go back, and if everything's fine, here's a partner I listed, from which partners I made my selections, and then I put it there, and at the end, I get an overview here, and I get an overview of what I selected. And what's happening now is sending the information to the SimCon, to the simulation software, and this will take some time, and it's asynchronous, and then the information will come back, and I get the product carbon footprint in this case. And here is an example which is sort of a little bit not real, but to demonstrate to you, when I have two scenarios played through, I can actually select both scenarios and compare, and I see the information for both scenarios, and then I can decide which one is best for my case, which takes longest, or which costs the most, or which has the best carbon footprint for my case, and then I really do the production and initiate the production. So that was what we did in the project. It's working really nicely, and the partners are really interested to keep this going afterwards. So that's really a big achievement we did. And what we also did, the service offering I created, we automatically create the Gaia-X service credentials and then publish this to, in this case, to the Pontus X network. So we have the participants and we have the service offering Gaia-X compliant. So that was the goal, and we achieved this. I think that's all I wanted to show you. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Quick walkthrough, but we can talk afterwards if you want to. I'm still around.
Also, good morning from me. It's the last part, so coffee break is coming close. The services presented here are not only used by EuProGigant. There is a whole ecosystem with different projects around. One of these projects is AMITS, or Austrian Manufacturing Innovation Data Space. A little bit a long name. The topic there is to make a data space for innovation processes and value chains. And the use case where I am in there is about product passes, process passes, and carbon footprints, especially of plastic products that are made with injection molding. A simple form of the product pass we are implementing by asset administration shell. On the start, there is the granulate, then there are the tools, the injection molding, after that quality checks. At the end, we want to use the product pass to get cradle to cradle, meaning that the product we produce starting from the granulate gets recycled in a way that it can be reused also as granulate. And especially the material part is helping there because we put everything in that is mixed into the granulate, also additives in form from fillers or fibers. And a little use case that we have for the demonstration is the quality check. That is, in this case, done by measuring the mass, a quite common way in plastics industries, as mostly you can see differences in the mass before there is obvious optical difference in the product. And here we use the data space now to transfer the measurement back to the company responsible to handle the product pass, where it is added as submodel in the asset of the product. A conclusion which we also made in the last 2 years of the project is that especially for small companies, it's a little bit complicated to use EDC. I forgot it at the beginning. Our project is built on Eclipse data space components. We are using the managed service of T-Systems called Living Lab, but also that is for SMEs often a little bit too complicated to use, or they need special staff that they want to hire. So one part in the project is to put a layer on top of the EDC. We call it convenience connector to simplify that all and also to get over some things the EDC lacks of, like an authentication. That we are implement with Keycloak, and the S3 service from Stefan is also used. It's also used to make compliance, which we are missing now, but it's work in progress. And these compliance credentials we try to add directly in the EDC asset in form of a link that solves also some problems that the verifiable presentations must be renewed regularly, but the EDC itself doesn't like to renew an asset after it is created, but the link makes the necessary coupling to the verifiable presentation in the back. So that was it already. And last words from Stefan.
I think since the coffee break is quite finished, we can go for it, so we're ready. If you have any question, just meet us at the coffee break, and if you don't have any question, please meet us really at the coffee break, because we have questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that very nice presentation, showing actually what I really liked is the intricate and inseparable connection between the technical stuff, you know, at the bottom and the use cases. And on various occasions you saw asset administration shell and the verifiable credential here and there. So this discussion of technical underpinning and use cases is in all the data space projects I see, and you are testament to that at this point in time, inextricably linked. Thanks a lot. Regarding Roman's mentioning of a convenience connector, I want to highlight the next two talks after the coffee break, starting at 11:30, so in 1 hour, almost 1 hour. And both talks talk about connectors, not convenience connectors, but other connectors, so data transfer agents, one from Fiverr, one from Gaia-X. And I welcome you back in 55 minutes. Enjoy the coffee break. Thanks for attending. See you.